Hey, this is Jack Downs with your video lesson for JOU 127. This is Monday the 22nd, and that would be class 7, the 7th class in the series. You're getting this class because maybe you're in quarantine. If you're in quarantine, stiff upper lip, you know, do your best, stick with it. I know that it's a lot of worry and isolation and so on. It's probably not a lot of fun. Hey, and I can still Zoom with you. So if you want to talk, let me know. We can Zoom. If you are maybe you're getting this lesson because you have not stuck with or gotten into the testing procedure every week. Got to do the pool testing. You missed it. You didn't get into it. Something like that. Hey, get with the program. The pool testing is required. I also think it's better to do it on a Monday or Tuesday. If you have an option, you can get a ticket for those days, because then if something went wrong, you'd still at least have Wednesday to go still do the test. Because although you have a ticket for a certain day and time, if you have to go a little earlier or later, it's better than not going at all, because then you end up not being able to go to class. And this is an in-person class. So if this is just a testing situation, that's not really an excuse eventually. Okay. All right. So that having been said, let's get on with the material. And as usual, let's take a look at the schedule first to see what's going on. So I'm going to share my screen, and it's going to show you, whoops, Moodle. There it is. So of course, you should be looking at Moodle regularly yourself. As I said, this is the date today, and the topic is kind of one we've already covered, but I'm going to go into more depth, review it again, and this idea of structuring information, general purpose, specific purpose, central thesis. I'm going to move on to the next stages and give a new handout about this too, which is about the matching organizational patterns. All right, so this is going to head you towards an assignment where you're going to be doing, not immediately, but soon, making up a bunch of SPSs, as we call them, and CTs, and main ideas. So a reminder that the advisor interview is due on March 3rd, which is not that far away now. So you definitely should have made your appointment with your advisor, should have made up your questions. I've received some questions about what questions you should ask. And really, that is up to you. They could be mostly generic things about the major, about what I should do to do a good job, how to be successful, or so on, and about their background, how they got into this topic, and what are the things that they teach, or so on. But maybe you want to find some more interesting questions. And to do that, you might want to, as I suggested before a number of times, and when I introduced the assignment, think about researching them a little bit. See what they've written, see what's been written about them, see what they do on social media, and so on, to come up with some more questions. So you should have questions, you should have the interview, take notes during it, notes, give at least 2 direct quotations, good ones, interesting quotes. You're going to type that whole thing up, and that's going to be submitted to me. Got it? Yes. And you're supposed to read chapter 6. We're nearing the end of the reading for Study Guide 1. Study Guide 1 is due in 1 week. So there's really just going to be one more chapter aside. You can see it for next class. I'm going to assign chapter 7. Read chapter 7. Finish Study Guide 1. So that's it. Finish it up. I've received a couple of questions about some questions. And if you have any problems with the study guide, let me know. Remember, you should have the study guide at this point on paper. And if you had earlier done some on a loose leaf or notebook paper or something, you can just staple it to that. If you still, for one reason or another, have not picked up your packet off my door, and you don't have the on-paper study guide, you got it in a digital form. You just keep going through it, and you just keep doing it on regular sheets of paper. Handwritten, has to be handwritten, and then that's what you will hand in, hopefully in person soon. Well, you see it's due in a week. For those of you who are in quarantine and can't give it to me that way, we'll see. I'll probably have you just photograph it and email it to me, so you can still get it on that date. In fact, let's say that if for some reason you can't come to the class to deliver it, you're going to photograph or scan it and email me the images of all the pages, which is going to be a lot of pages. So it'd be better to get it to me in person, or at least drop it on my door or something. Okay. All right, and you're supposed to be working on the entomology naming presentation. So I assigned this last class. I think it's probably last class. And you've got like 3 presentations that have been assigned now. For some of you, you've already completed 1. You're about to do the 2nd, and then we'll have the 3rd. The entomology name presentation is going to be presented a week from Wednesday. There may be some of you that, because of testing problems or something, end up kind of maybe doing as many as 3 presentations in one day or close to it. So we may be doing a lot of catch-up presentations, makeup presentations, and we may have to push it a day or 2 also, a class or 2 also. But you should still be doing your preparation. There's a handout on that, and it is available on Moodle. I'll show you in a minute, maybe here. And so please review it thoroughly. What it really comes down to is you have 3 main ideas, right? First of all, what does my name mean, and/or what is the history of my name? That's going to be online research, or perhaps library research. If you want to go get a book, that's great. That's great too. And record the websites, getting more information about them, so you can cite them with some additional information, and you're going to make lots of notes, so you have lots of information from sources. I say at least 2 sources. I think it'd be better to have 3 sources. Anyway, so a significant amount of real sourced information. There's going to be contradictions and conflicts between the sources about what your name means, where it comes from, depending on different cultures and so on. Some names are easier than others. So research on the name. Naming idea number 2. How was your name given to you? Who gave you your name and why? So now you're going to go you can interview probably a parent or a grandparent or a brother or sister or an aunt and uncle, maybe even do a couple of interviews, almost certainly over the phone, maybe on Zoom, maybe in person even, depending on if that's an option. And you're going to talk to them about your name. You're going to make sure you tell them it's for a class. You're going to take notes as you do. You're going to get you're going to get a direct quotation from them also. I think I only say 1, but look at the assignment to be sure, okay? So direct quotation, you're going to take notes, you're going to actually type those notes up, and those are going to be handed to me as part of the assignment. When you do the presentation, you give me those notes too. If you do multiple interviews, you only have to give me the notes from one of them, okay? Whichever is the one that's most directly helpful. And if anybody has a reason, and occasionally this happens, and if it does, don't be afraid to come tell me, a reason that you can't talk to anybody about your name, anybody who would know about how your name was given for any reason, just come and talk to me and we'll come up with an alternative. But that's number 2, main idea number 2. Main idea number 3 is your reflection on your name. What do you think about your name? Okay, about how good it is for you, how much it reflects you or doesn't. Maybe you've actually chosen a different name. Maybe you're thinking about maybe using a nickname. So it's a personal reflection on your name. Then the assignment goes on to say, now let's build an introduction and let's build a conclusion. And what's required for the introduction in particular is quite a lot. And it's getting you ready for real introductions, real structure here, real structure in your presentation. So you're going to build that structure, you're going to take notes, you actually map it out on paper first. And I will be talking to you probably next class about converting all these notes that you're building into index cards, which you can pick up in the classroom or from me. And if you're not there with the classroom, hopefully you just find some index cards on your own, or come by my office and pick them up at my office door. There's index cards there, or I'll put them there very soon. So do read thoroughly through that handout about about what is required for the introduction. At least 2 attention-getting devices, which I list a number of them there and went over them before also, right? And then you have assigned, then you build to your actual name, right, from those attention-getting devices, and then you do a signposted preview statement, right, which tells me what you actually list out the things you're going to say. The idea number 2, 1, 2, and 3, right, like that. And you say first, we will use we language, changed it from talk to explore to discuss to whatever. There's lots of other words shown there in the handout. And then you're going to pause, and you're going to do main idea number 1, main idea number 2, main idea number 3, double pause, conclusion, go out the conclusion, reflect back to the beginning, review in different language quickly, those main ideas again, to really hammer them home, and hopefully have some kind of a clincher. Good, that's the presentation. So first one with index cards. I asked you to read a handout for today, which is actually a handout I asked you to read before, to review it again. And also I'm going to ask you, it's not listed here, but I'll give you or show you a handout you need to look at some more too. And then finally, not finally, have you worked on a rhetorical analysis essay? It's not due for a while yet, but still, if you have any extra moments, it'd be a good time to look back at that assignment, go watch the TED Talk, take notes, and start writing the essay. Study guide 1. Then I ask you, then the advisor interview. Yes, again, it's reminding you it's due. Chapter 7 and finish the study guide, a rhetorical analysis paper or essay. I think it's better called essay than paper. And then exam 1 is coming up. Exam 1 is coming up. So it would be a good time to start reviewing those word distinctions, that first group. I think it's A through C, it says it's on the first exam. Same as is in your study guide. And then, of course, Wednesday this week is the quotation presentation. All right. And if you haven't done it yet, it's also your collage presentation. If you can come to class, and I certainly hope you can. So, and by the way, if you're just get released to go to class like on Wednesday, theoretically on Wednesday morning, you could practice with me, but you have to get in touch with me to set up the appointment. Otherwise, remember, there is practice this week if you are released to do it. All right. On Monday and Tuesday at 5 to 7 in the classroom with TAs. So remember the quotation presentation. I've gone over the collage a bunch of times. I'm not going to do that again. Quotation presentation is simply a quotation. You have memorized it. That makes this a little different. We don't really do much memorization, but it's just a sentence or two, right? Probably just a sentence. And also the person's name and then some kind of qualifying statement. You remember the example I did, right? You're getting sick of me saying it. Anyway, I'll do it again just to do it. I said, beer, said Benjamin Franklin, one of our founding fathers, is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. And then I would pause. People would applaud. I'd go back to my seat. And if we have time, I'll probably ask you to do it a second time. Great. That's all there is to it. In that attribution, which includes a name and a bit of qualifying information, or the qualifying information first and then the name, either way, that is actually could be in the middle. Oh, sorry, I've got a pop-up. In the middle of if you have a good breaking point in the quotation, mine actually I think would have been just as good if it was at the end. All right. So either way, that's a quotation. So that's the schedule. That was a long list of schedule, but it's a lot going on, a lot of things to keep in the air, and especially troublesome if you're not in class. So just want to go over all that. All right, let's stop the share for a moment because you're sick of looking at that page. All right, and now you get to look at me. So you had a handout which I asked you to read, and it's sitting there on Moodle. I was going to show you the handouts, right? I'll show you in a minute. It's called well, that's no good to hold it up, but in their packet it would be a blue one. It's called Structuring Presentation Information, and I went over this before. The idea is you determine every presentation has a general purpose. What's the general purpose? General purposes are to inform or to persuade, and we literally write them as what we call an infinitive statement. That means a to statement, to inform, to persuade, and you literally write that. What is your general purpose? To inform, to persuade. Some people say that there's another general purpose, which is called to entertain, but we say, everything should be entertaining. So you determine that, and you are actually probably, almost in this class, you are assigned to either do a informative or persuasive. And in the beginning here, they're all going to be informative. So it's important that you can be able to tell the difference, because if you're assigned to informative, you don't want to by mistake end up with a persuasive presentation. So what is the difference? That's something really important to know. I went over that last time or previously. So remember, to inform is just to present the information, just like a reporter, right? Just like a teacher. Just give you the information. I'm not telling you it's good or bad. I'm not telling you to do something or change the way you change a behavior or change the way you feel about something. I'm not suggesting that society should change something, or our town or our city or our college. should change some policy or behavior or something. I just am giving the information. But persuasive is I am trying to persuade something, either you to believe something or for something to happen. Something to happen as far as a personal change in behavior, or maybe a change in policy that affects like a college or a community or a group or a country or a world or whatever. And anytime I use words like should do something, or anytime I use words like best, better, worst, so on, those kind of words that define those qualities of things, then it's almost certainly persuasive. And then we say, so we try to keep track between those two, and you're assigned to one or the other, so that's important. And then we develop from that a specific purpose, right? In fact, we develop what we call a specific purpose statement, an SPS. And I broke those down in terms of, is it specific enough? And in fact, in the handout, and I'll show it to you now, why not? So I'll give you a break from looking at me. I'm gonna share the screen again, and I'm going to go back into the Moodle page and tell you that this handout that I'm talking about is in a couple places. It's certainly here, right in that top area. Let's click on that. And this is the handout. Okay. Specific, and this is the stuff we went over. I just went over. The specific questions, is it specific enough? In other words, is it focused and clear? Does it use language that is figurative, like exaggeration or very slangy or something? We don't want a lot of metaphor, simile, or other literary devices in our SPS. That makes it less specific. Is it too broad or general? And also, can you accomplish it in the allotted time? We have to evaluate our SPS to see if it fulfills all the criteria. And I break this down in terms of, are they specific questions or purpose? Does it satisfy the right purpose, the general purpose? In other words, is it really informative if you're supposed to be doing informative? Does it contain just one purpose? Or is it like, I'm going to try to say two things? No, just one, just one. Is it relevant to my audience? Which also, to me, also means the same as number 4, which does it serve my audience really? In other words, should they care, or can I persuade them to care? And is it something that they should want to know? And by the way, this is actually an area where informative presentations become kind of persuasive. Because sometimes in an informative presentation, I need to persuade you that you should want to know. Even though I'm just giving you information, I still want you to want to know it. So sometimes I have to kind of show you why it's important. So that's actually where there's a little bit of persuasion in informative presentations. And then, is it ethical? Is the purpose ethical? In other words, is this something that it should be good to know, or maybe something that's illegal or unethical that I'm presenting to you? And then finally, the statement questions. It literally should say, to inform or to persuade my audience. And if it doesn't have any of those, then the statement is not formed correctly. But what follows that should be a complete idea, not just a thing, not just a concept or an object. It should be a complete idea. In fact, it's almost certainly going to tell you how many things I'm going to tell you about, and to get a little bit more specific. It can't be a question. It can't be too trivial, right? It's just silly, just very small scale, like why you can't do a presentation of that, there's not enough there. And it can't be too technical, which could vary with the audience. Some audiences could be fine with something very technical. Some audience, maybe not. Ours, we're going to assume is just kind of a general audience. So if it's a highly technical science topic, maybe it wouldn't be appropriate for us. And then we talked about, once we develop that SPS, that right directly from that comes the central thesis. It is the kind of the solves the SPS. It's the overall main idea. It includes a residual message, like the stuff you're supposed to come out of there with. And then it's also, it's what we hope you remember afterwards. It should say, this is how the SPS is achieved, okay? It should include within it what will become the main ideas. All information I want the audience to really remember, and the main ideas retrieved from it. And then the main ideas need to be complete sentences, need to be signposted. They're very repetitive, by the way. That's okay. The language is consistent. In other words, language is consistent. All right, that's not the way we say them, it's the way we build them. We build them like in an outline. In fact, we use Roman numerals for them, like an outline. There should be 2 to 5, and 3 is very common. 4 is fine. 2 and 5 are okay also, but not less than 2. In other words, 2 or more. And more than 5, that's too many. People can't remember them. And they should be actually be the ideas and not transitions. But there could very well be transitions between these ideas. And then finally, once we have those main ideas, then we can very easily build the signposted preview statement, which you now have also explained in your entomology presentation, which is one that you're going to be giving soon, right? Has to include all the main ideas in the same order. They're signposted, actually numbered. We say the numbers. We use a we language. We vary that word. Don't say talk over and again. Vary that word. Some examples. Delivered at a slower rate. I think it kind of makes sense. You got their attention. You built to your topic, and now you're saying, okay, here we go. We're going to talk about this. Next, we will discuss this, and that's probably a little slower rate. And then you move immediately to that. The order is the same. All right, you move immediately from that after a pause into the body, which is the main ideas. Right, good. So that was that handout. All right, now I want to show you another handout, which is also which is actually not in this top area here, which had to do with the first 3 weeks. It's down in the assignment handouts where this stuff is duplicated, and there's a lot more also. And it's actually in the areas called types of informative speeches and matching organizational patterns. That handout number 12. So you need the handout number 12, which I'll be handing out in class. And this is what that looks like. Okay, so here's the thing. We're talking now informative presentations. Remember, we're really taking a turn into informative, which is what we're going to be doing most of for a while. We talked about you build the SPS, but it can be useful to try to figure out, to take SPSs, take these purpose statements, and kind of describe what kind of an SPS they are, right? Try to make criteria and try to fit them in different slots, different baskets, right? And then the same thing for your central thesis, because once you realize how you categorize these things, then you might actually have a better idea about what you want to do with it. And if nothing else, I think the exercise of breaking down information into components can be really useful because it helps you to really understand what's going on there, right? So this idea of object, process, event, concept, we actually can remember this with the letters COPE, COPE, concept. That's the easiest way to remember it. Concept, object, process, event. Your SPS can be categorized as one of those types. Is it about an object, which is just a thing or a person or a place, all right? Not an idea, just an object. And there's lots of objects is a very common basis of an SPS. Is it a process? How something happens? Something usually involves steps. Also not that unusual. Is it an event? Event can be a little tricky because events some people think they're sometimes people get confused about what really is an event and what isn't. And frankly, there is sometimes a little gray area for discussion among these. Are you talking about an event? An event isn't necessarily like a thing that happened on this date, but it probably does have a past, a present, and a future, right? So it's usually the end of a series of actions. So we can get confused between events and processes. Processes have steps where we build something, for instance. An event might be the culmination of a series of things, like the causes that led to a battle or something, or the formation of an organization. The formation of the organization is the event, which had things that led up to it. And so it had a past and a future and a present or something. So we have to be careful when discussing event speeches because they also could very well tend on problems. And then if we get down to problem solution, that is persuasive. And concepts are usually a little easier to figure out because they are like ideas, right? Theories, philosophies, principles. So that's how we separate out, how we categorize SPSs. We can also categorize central theses. Is it topical? Topical is most common. So it's when we look at these main ideas, for instance, that are in your central thesis and your list of main ideas that follow, right? And we divide it, and there's just like topics, subtopics, topical. So it's just this topic, this topic, this topic, this topic. They aren't arranged in order and steps, right? Like in chronological. They're not like arranged in space, like parts of something. They're just this thing, this thing, this thing, right? Chronological, pretty easy to use. It's things that build up to something else in order over time. Causal, one thing links to another, a cause and effect, right? And it's fine to discuss something that is a cause and effect, but we have to make sure we're not saying a problem and a solution, okay? And spatial, a little rarer, but it reflects about objects, and it's when something is like actual physical space. We break things up in a physical space and talk about them. Again, not problem solution. And this will make more sense in a minute. Certain SPS categorizations, labels, SPS labels can only be used with certain organizational patterns. So concept speeches can only be topical. They don't have chronology. They don't have space, the concept. Objects could be topological, chronological, spatial. Process things could be topical or chronological. And event SPSs could be topical or chronological, and the only ones could be causal. Something can cause something to happen. Remember, an event could be just something happening, not necessarily like we think of an event like a scheduled thing. It's just a thing that happened. All right, this will probably make a little more sense when I kind of give you some examples and build it out a little more. So let me go ahead and do that now, but you might want to keep these ideas handy as I do. So try to think about how it matches what I do. All right, so I'm going to give you some some examples here. And type them up a little bit as I go. So remember, I'm going to build a couple of SPSs. So we always have to inform my audience. And if we don't have that, we already have a problem. Okay. So if you ever see anybody, and you typically are given on exams, for instance, SPSs that have problems, you have to say what the problems are. First of all, it has to include the general purpose. That would be an error if it didn't have the to inform. If it said just to inform about, it should be focused on an audience. So we should always be thinking about the audience. You know, it's always about the audience, not about us or other vague groups. To my audience, about is not unusual to use, and it's fine. Let's say I'm going to say snowshoeing. So the problem is what? Think about it for a minute. The problem is that is not a complete idea, snowshoeing, right? It's just kind of vague, right? So it has to be a complete idea. How about for my audience about the fact that, I'll just say this one, the fact that snowshoeing is the best winter time activity. Or about the 3 reasons that show that snowshoeing is the best wintertime activity. Best. That's persuasive, all right? Something's better, best, worse, good, bad, so on. That's persuasive. You're supposed to be doing informative, right? It says inform right there. So let's say, instead I could say about what? 3 types of modern snowshoes. And that would be a good example of a pretty good SPS, I think. Good. All right. And then we would have what? A central thesis. So this is the SPS. Right. Now we have a central thesis. The central thesis is going to be the 3. In fact, I'm going to just take this. I duplicate that language. The 3 types of modern snowshoes are aluminum, which I misspelled. Aluminum, I can't say it either. Frame, composite, and EVA foam. So I can see within my central thesis. My central thesis solves the SPS, or is how you achieve it, and I can see within there are already my main ideas. Before I go any further, let's use our new information and think about our ways of categorizing these things, right? First of all, we talk about the label for the SPS. Remember, COPE, concept, object, process, event. Which one of these is this SPS? It's about a thing, right? It's an object. So I would say object. And then the CT, what about that? Well, remember, those we break down into, and I don't have any clever memory device for you for that. Maybe you can come up with one. Topical, chronological, causal, spatial, TCCS. Maybe you remember that? Topical, chronological, causal, and spatial. Well, we know that objects can only be topical, chronological, and spatial. Which is this? Well, I'm saying there's this kind of thing, this kind of one, and this kind of one. They're not arranged in space. They're not arranged in chronological order. It is topical, which is the most common. Just one topic, another topic, another topic. That's how I categorize those. And do you remember how we would next build our main ideas? Remember, our main ideas would be Roman numeral well, Roman numeral 1, 2, and 3. There are 3 here. And I'm going to put a period after each one. And that one's screwed up now. Okay, of course it is. All right. So I would say the first type of modern is the aluminum frame. Okay, and then I would just do that same thing over and over again. And because I act like it's a bit of a pain to do it, you might think that therefore I am like saying you should be quick about it or something, but it's fine to, in this case, to copy and paste. But when you actually do this in an assignment, I really want you to do it. I really want you to still write it all the way out, not with dots and just like fill in the blank kind of stuff or something, but really write them all out or type them all out or whatever. And I say the second, whatever, is composite. And I would say the third, that's right. Third type of modern snowshoe is the EVA foam. Okay, and you can see, as you can see from my pop-up, I have a meeting to go to in just a minute. So I'm probably going to have to pause this and continue in just a couple minutes. Third type of modern snowshoe is the EVA foam snowshoe. Okay, good. So that's how we build our main ideas. And remember, from our main ideas, directly from that comes our signposted preview statement. And how would that really work in your introduction? You don't have to write that out for me, but in your introduction, you're going to probably at least write out the keywords for it. I would say, first, we will talk about the aluminum frame snowshoe. Second, we will discuss the second type of modern snowshoe, which is the composite snowshoe. And third, I would literally use my hands to probably number this out. Or lastly, we will discover what makes the EVA foam snowshoe something different, whatever, stuff like that. So that actually builds right into my, and then I start with those main ideas. I don't say them necessarily just in these words exactly as I say here, but the outline helps me to organize myself, and it derives directly from this. And we can see how we also got to the label and the organizational pattern for this stuff. And next we're going to start up with another one in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to have to pause this for now, and there might be a little gap in the video, but we'll jump in just a minute. Okay, had a little interruption there, so let me continue with what we were talking about. And that means I've got to share my screen again. Where was I? There I was. Okay, good. So, so I explained how we developed, labeled, and then categorized this SPS and CT, and then developed the main ideas, and then how that flows into the signposted preview statement. Good, yeah. Okay, so let me use another example, okay? How about, again, it's always going to be to inform, we're doing informative now, my audience, always required, that stuff's always required, right? About garbage. Again, we got the infinitive statement to inform. It's focused on my audience. That's good, but what follows needs to be a complete idea. Not necessarily a complete sentence, but a complete idea. So, and it isn't. So therefore, that's a problem. Let me expand that out. Okay, good. So what do we do? We have to develop the idea more. So I could say to inform my audience about why they should compost instead of putting stuff in the garbage. And that, of course, is persuasive, trying to change the behavior. So be careful if I'm talking about, if I'm focusing on a problem, then I'm probably talking about a solution, and then it's becoming, so the garbage, if I look at garbage as a problem, then it's probably, I'm looking for a solution, and I'm going to persuade people to do the solution. Now, I can still talk about a problem in a way, as long as I'm not presenting like a solution you should do, but here are some options, kind of, right? So for instance, I could say something like this: to inform my audience about, which is, it's going to get close to persuasive, but I think it's still stayed on the other side about 3 steps to reduce the amount of garbage it created in their homes. Yeah, it's suggesting some things you could do, but it's not telling you you should do them. I would say this one is a little borderline. I'm going to stick with it. Once we talk, we can present like ways to compost. Steps to composting, for instance. That is not saying you should compost, or maybe it's morally unethical not to compost or reduce garbage. We're saying these steps to reduce the amount of garbage. So kind of in between there, right? Anyway, and what would they, so that's the SPS, of course, right? And it is informative. I think otherwise it meets the criteria pretty well, as long as we assume it, we agree that it's informative. An essential thesis, of course, is going to be what? Well, you have to make up the 3 steps. And when you're building those, that means you may very well have to do some research. And these are not exactly that well researched. I'm kind of somewhat off the top of my head, but we'll see. 3 steps to reduce the amount of garbage, using the same kind of language, created in your home are make meal plans, stop using disposable plates, and begin composting food waste. Maybe those are 3 okay ones, maybe not that great, but you got to get the idea. So I've built from my SPS to my central thesis, and within it I can see my main ideas there already, right? And let's take a look, let's think about for a moment this new idea about how do we label the SPS, how do we categorize as far as an organizational pattern, central thesis. Okay, so we had steps to do something. And if I'm imagining these things are kind of like done in order, like you do a meal plan, you'd make sure you didn't use disposable plates, and then afterwards you take the food waste and you compost it. It's kind of like steps in a process. I could imagine I'm building it that way, and I think it would be a process. You could imagine it differently, but I'm going to say it's process. I think I can make that argument pretty well. And I'm also going to imagine I'm doing these things kind of in order, in time, and I'm describing them that way. Each day you make a meal plan, right? When you serve the meal, you make sure you don't use disposable stuff, and then afterwards the food that's left over that you're not going to save to eat again, or any other waste food or waste that was created in preparation, you compost it. Okay, so that's, I'm gonna do things in order, in time, that's chronological. So you could conceive of this a little differently, where it's not a process, but it's just different topics. All right, and then you could say maybe it is more of an event-based thing. So you could conceive of this differently, but I think you get the general idea. And of course, you should also have the general idea about what my main ideas be. And I could write these out, but I'm getting a little lazy, so I'm not going to. But of course, you can see Roman numeral 1, all right? To reduce the amount of garbage created in your home, you can, the first step to reduce the amount of garbage created in your home is make meal plans. The second step to reduce the amount of garbage in your home is to stop using, so that Roman number 2, stop using disposable plates. The third step to Roman number 3, reduce the amount of garbage created in your home, is to begin composting food waste. Okay, good. So that's your main ideas. And of course, how does that become a signposted preview statement? It's very similar to what I just said, but now it's said more conversationally. Imagine I'm saying in my presentation, as at the end of my introduction, and I say, first, we will discuss reducing the amount of garbage created in your home by making meal plans ahead of time. Second, we'll talk about the fact that if you stop using disposable plates, that will also reduce the amount of garbage you create. And lastly, we will explore the idea of composting food waste and how that can make a big difference in the amount of waste that you create in your home. So I said it more conversationally. I changed things up. I use the we language, and I move things around to try to make it flow a little better. All right, let's do another one. Why not? I got another one here that I was going to do. Oh yeah. So let's talk about something else. Let's say inform my audience about okay, to audience about the 3 main effects of the War of 1812 and the Battle of Plattsburgh. Of course, already we have some problems, right? Yes, we do have the to inform my audience. That's good. But what follows is actually 2 purposes, right? So we don't have 2 purposes. It's just too much. You could never complete this anyway. It's pretty broad. It's pretty big. I think I would just do 3 main effects of the Battle of Plattsburgh, which I would have to explain in my presentation did come in the War of 1812. And then of course that'd be my SPS, right? SPS. All right, and then comes next my central thesis, right? Or essentially central idea, called central thesis. All right, what's the central thesis? I'll move this down a little bit. So let's move this whole thing down. Central thesis would be the 3 effects, or major effects, probably major would be better, of the Battle of Plattsburgh were that the British invasion fleet was forced to retreat to Canada, Britain returned, that's not how you spell Britain, returned territory, US, and Britain agreed to a peace treaty. All right, good. So we've got, obviously, the main ideas are right there in the central thesis. You can see how the main ideas would be built out now, I hope. But again, let's go back and look at this as part of a labeling this SPS and categorizing the central thesis. So remember the labels for the SPS are COPE, concept, object, process, event. Is this a concept? No, I mean, there can be concepts in it, but it itself is not a concept. Is it a process? Effects of biology. It could be, you could say it's a cause and effect, all right? But that's not really part of our SPS. Concept, object, process, event. It's an event. The event is the battle, right? So it's an event. And then we have these were the causes, the things that were caused by this event, right? So I would say it is causal. Remember this category, the organizational patterns, to remind you, are topical, chronological, causal, and spatial. And really, when you start to think about it, these things, these ways we label the SPS and the ways we categorize the organizational pattern of the central thesis, they really will describe just about anything, just about anything. Good. And then the main ideas, okay, are simply Roman numeral number 1. The first main, let's say major effect of the Battle of Plattsburgh was that the British invasion fleet was forced to retreat to Canada. Number 2, the second major effect of the Battle of Plattsburgh was that Britain returned territory to the United States. And Roman numeral 3, the third major effect of the Battle of Plattsburgh was that Britain agreed to a peace treaty. Okay, we got our main ideas, and those obviously flow right into a signposted preview statement, more conversational, not repeated language exactly the same way. And I would use the we word. I would vary that word instead of talk and describe and explore and so on, as is in your handouts. Good. And then let's do one more. And I'm mostly doing these so you can see the SPSs and the CTs, but also so you get the ideas of the different categories and what might be examples of those. Let's go here. And of course, we're going to have our SPS first. And let's say, to inform my audience about 3 major principles of democratic socialism. You can see what I'm going for here, right? I'm coming up with a concept one. This would definitely be a concept SPS, and you can see it right now. We talk about a philosophy or a theory or something, maybe a scientific one, or in this case, a political one, or sociological one. Then you're definitely talking about a concept. And then the CT, it's going to flow directly from it, but you have to know what those 3 are. And I'll just speak it out to you, and I'll say 3 major principles of democratic socialism are regulation of the capitalist economy, addressing social inequalities, and creating a strong social safety net. Now you've got your main ideas right there, which are presented in that order, right? Say the first major principle of democratic socialism is the regulation of the capitalist economy. The second major principle of democratic socialism is addressing social inequalities, and so on. And then those flow directly into your signposted preview statement. But that's that central thesis. The 3 major principles of democratic socialism are regulation of capitalist economy, addressing social inequalities. So think about those things: regulation of capitalist economies, addressing social inequalities, creating a strong social safety net. Are those things that come in order in a process, like chronological or something? No, they are not. They're just one thing, another thing, another thing. So that would be, that's the central thesis is topical. Just breaking it down into topics. And finally, I'm not going to write this one out, but I want to come up with an example of an object for you, because so far we did a concept, and we did a process, we did an event. What about an object SPS? How about an SPS that said, in fact, let me stop sharing my screen now. How about an SPS that said, I'm going to describe to you the main parts of the Statue of Liberty. All right, that could be an interesting informative presentation, because of course I could tell you what they're built of, and what problems there were, how they've had to be repaired, or I don't know what. So I take a thing, an object, and it has to be an object for it to be broke down as spatial. So this is an object spatial, because I'm saying first is the base, it's at the bottom, right? Now then there's the torso, then there's the torch and the crown and whatever, how I break down those parts. And it's parts I can organize like on a piece of paper and show like on a map. And if it's, maybe I'm going to talk about the parts of a city, right, of different neighborhoods or something, and how they relate. So that could, it would be spatially arranged. So that's would be, those are both would be examples of object spatial. So object is the label for the SPS, and spatial is the organizational pattern of central thesis. Okay, so that's your first look at that. You're going to need that, the organizational patterns, I don't think are in study guide 1. But as you move into study guide 2, you will need them. And as you start to get to an assignment soon about making a bunch of your own SPSs and central thesis and main ideas, you will need to be able to label them and stuff. So that was quite a bit of stuff, review and some new, and a handout for you also. So that's all I have for you today, except please work on your presentations, get with your testing, and if it happens that you're quarantined for some time, well, first of all, stay in touch with me. Let me know as schedules change and so on, and quarantine schedules and stuff. And so we can kind of predict when you're going to be back and stuff. And then hopefully you'll be able to do your presentations in person. And I'm not ready yet to pull the trigger on any other options for those presentations, but we'll see what happens.